Welcome to OAC Vancouver's podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We believe that Jesus is needed and relevant for people in Vancouver today. The message of God's love and promise of wholeness was destined to be experienced within a faith community that worships, studies scripture, and prays together. We warmly welcome you to journey with us towards greater connection, purpose, and peace. We'll be sharing our recorded services and conversations with health and wellness experts. Enjoy.
Today, we're kicking off the new sermon series called Bridges. And you've probably heard the question, why did the chicken cross the road? But my question today is, why did the people cross the bridge? Was it to get to the other side? Now, we have a few bridges throughout the Lower Mainland, and they weren't built overnight. They took years. And obviously, these bridges were built so that people could get to the other side. Now, if you don't know too much about Vancouver history, the city was founded in 1886. Now that's like almost 130 years ago now. And let's compare how long construction projects took back then when they were developing the city compared to today. Now we have much more advanced technology, and maybe today's projects are a little more complex. But in the late 1800s and 1900s, when the city was developing, can you imagine how long it took to build things? Like, we get annoyed when we're sitting through traffic that's caused by construction, but can you imagine how much longer it took to build things back in those days? Now, whenever I see historical sites and buildings around the world, it always amazes me, like, just taking the mass of it, like the complexity, the design, and like, just thinking about the fact that people hundreds of years ago, they were able to build these things. And it just goes to show how amazing we as humans are. We're innovative, we're resilient, and it's shown throughout different times in history. So today, we'll look at the Granville Street Bridge. From when it was first built, there were 3 iterations. So it was knocked down twice before we got to the third one, which still stands today. So the first one was completed in 1889, and it cost $16,000 to build. That's like a used car, maybe, $16,000. But in those days, that's how much it took. So originally, it was built to connect Granville Street on this side of the water to the other side of False Creek in what is now downtown Vancouver. And in those days, in downtown, there was another bridge that connected the city to a farming community called Eburn. Now, I can see what kind of importance having that bridge into downtown to be able to get access to that other bridge to the farming community, how important that is for people to have better access to food. Like, they probably didn't have all these grocery stores around the city where you can just go conveniently. You had to physically go to the farmers and farmers markets to get food. And then 2 years later, after the Granville Street Bridge was built, a company called the Canadian Pacific Railway, they were clearing the Fairview Slopes, which is just a few kilometers north of us, towards Vancouver General Hospital, and they were clearing it to make land for people to settle there. And that's pretty close to the Granville Street Bridge area. So the second bridge, it was built in 1909. I found this quote in an article. It says, "The first Granville Bridge was built across False Creek in 1889 when Vancouver was only 3 years old. But as the city boomed, the bridge proved woefully inadequate, so the city decided to build a bigger one, which opened on September 6, 1909. So within 3 years of Vancouver being inaugurated as a city, like they already knew that things need to happen in order for the city to keep moving on, to keep growing and thriving. But by the 1940s, World War II started to happen, and then Vancouver's economy was growing again. So they started talking about the need to rebuild the Granville Street Bridge. So it was rebuilt a third time. Construction began in 1949, and it took 5 years to complete in 1954. This bridge took $16 million to build and still stands today. Even though it's still standing, there's still continuous improvements. And while I was researching the bridges in Vancouver, I learned that some of the bridges built in the past no longer exist. Some were rebuilt or improved multiple times, just like this bridge. And since the beginning of time, people have been studying so many aspects of our lives, like health, plants, there's so many things people study, and it's in order to try and get a better understanding and see how we can improve things for humankind in general. And also throughout history, though, people have had different ideas and they didn't always agree with each other. For instance, the Burrard Street Bridge. It seems to flow okay today, but maybe a decade or so ago, there were debates between city council and other people involved, and they were debating about how to improve the increasing amount of traffic that was passing over the Burrard Street Bridge. And before we got to today's current lane assignments, there were multiple experiments to see what lane configuration would be the best to accommodate all types of traffic, which is pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles. I don't know if any of you have ever biked over the Burrard Bridge, but I have, and it's a great path. So why spend all this money? Why go through all this trouble building, then rebuilding, and improving things? Well, the people behind these projects, they had a goal. They had a vision because they knew that better access to different parts of the city would boost the economy in the long run. They saw the potential. They knew the pros would far outweigh the cons in the big picture. And different companies were funding these different projects because they could see how it would be profitable to their company in the end. And we benefit from their efforts today. Let's say you live in West Point Grey and you needed to drive to the Park Royal Mall, but the Lionsgate Bridge didn't exist. Now, you would have to go all the way to East Van to get onto Highway 1 just to get to North Van. And Google Maps here says 37 minutes and almost 30 kilometers, I think. Compared to if the Lionsgate Bridge existed, much shorter drive, 24 minutes. I think that's a little optimistic depending on traffic, but it's about half the distance, almost 15K. Now, throughout life, we cross so many bridges, both physically and metaphorically. And let's think of the decisions we make and the actions we take throughout our lives as bridges that we cross to get whatever end result or destination that we're trying to go to. And sometimes before we cross these bridges, we debate our choices internally. Like, we weigh the outcomes in different scenarios. If I take bridge A, it will get me to X. But if I take bridge B, I'll get to Y, and so on and so on. But we all know that life is not just any typical bridge. It actually never ends. Life is ongoing, things come up, and where we want to be is always changing at different points of our lives. And sometimes maybe the bridge of life feels like there's an erupting volcano beneath you, spewing hot magma and destroying the bridge in front of you. And then sometimes maybe on the bridge of life, it's like a beautiful waterfall with birds chirping, nature smells in the air, a rainbow in the sky. Or sometimes maybe life can be unknown, foggy, scary. You don't really know what's going on, and you're not sure if your next step is even in the right direction. Then before you know it, the clouds break and you're back at the waterfall. Some bridges we cross in life, they might be quick, others might be much longer or have a series of obstacles along the way before reaching the other end of the bridge. And not everyone's bridges in life will be the same. Someone's bridge might be longer, some might have bridges filled with potholes, and we all have different obstacles and challenges that we deal with. And maybe sometimes we find ourselves comparing our bridges to people around us and their bridges, whether we know them or not. Maybe we hear about something and we think to ourselves, oh, that person will be okay. I'm going through X, Y, and Z. They don't have it as bad as I do. And what they're going through isn't that bad. But the thing is, you never really know what kind of bridges someone else is facing. There could be all sorts of bridges. There's all sorts of different personalities and lives that people live. Maybe someone's work environment isn't the best, and the bridge to getting another job is applying for jobs. And there's just endless possibilities of the types of bridges we'll cross through our lifetime. Now, out of these next few bridges that I'll show, which one would you prefer to cross? Would it be something rickety like this? Maybe the rope sway as you cross across the water? Or maybe this bridge built into the side of a cliff high up? Or maybe, if you're daring, a bridge with a glass bottom. You can see everything beneath you, the water, the trees, everything, the ravine, whatever it may be, full of potholes and growing more potholes. Or would you prefer something sturdy? It might be long. Can you see how long that spans? But it looks sturdy to me. Or would you prefer something short and sweet, safe and secure, like this bridge? So unless you're on the more daring side, you'd probably prefer one of the last two bridges I showed, right? And sometimes when you're crossing a bridge in your life, it takes some faith or change. And maybe whatever is needed to get across the bridge, maybe it makes you a little uncomfortable. But when you cross the bridge and reach your goal, most times there'll be a new goal to follow, that one. And sometimes it might feel like the next goal is getting farther, or maybe the next goal is in a whole different spot now. The further we go across this bridge of life, the longer it seems to get. And sometimes when we face hardships while crossing a bridge, maybe we turn around and go back to where we started. Maybe it's for some sense of comfort, to go somewhere that's familiar, and then we get stuck in a rut. We'll stay at the beginning of the bridge until we start taking actions again to make our way across the bridge to where we know we want to be. Usually, once we're back on the bridge, we remember how good it feels to be on the bridge heading in the other direction. Now, one of the bridges in my life that I've been crossing for years is going through life being completely deaf in my right ear. Now, I found out I was half deaf in kindergarten at 5 years old. The school or healthcare system had scheduled a group to come in to test our whole class. So if I hadn't been diagnosed at that age, I'm not sure when I would have figured it out for myself. Probably eventually. But since I've been serving on the praise team, before we got our fancy stage monitors, which we're not using today, and before the in-ear monitors, I always needed to be on the right side of the stage so that everyone else is on my good hearing side and I can hear them. And even though we have the in-ear monitors now, I still gravitate to that side even when I'm leading up here up front. So if you've ever wondered, that's why. And my hearing does kind of steer how I deal with different situations. Whenever I walk and talk with people, they always have to be over here or I can't hear them. And usually the people who know, they'll just naturally gravitate to this side, and I like to think that I trained them up properly. Now, I used to be insecure about speaking up in group settings or when I was having conversations with more than one person at a time, because I was scared that I would say something that's completely off or irrelevant in response to someone because I didn't hear them clearly. But eventually in my 20s, I had saved up enough money to buy hearing aids, and they did give me a little more confidence, and I wear them from time to time if I feel I need to. But this bridge for me of going through life half deaf will never end. It's just a fact of life. But the question for myself is whether I'm going to let that impede me from keep trying to make my way across this bridge. Now, my bridge has changed since I started life. And some of, like the Burrard Street Bridge, the Granville Street Bridge, like they've had improvements, and my own bridge has had improvements as well. Some were of my own initiative, some were done by God and the people that He's put in my life. But I know I wouldn't have gotten this far on the bridge by myself. Now, as believers in God, I would think that one of the bridges we definitely want to cross is the one that gets us into heaven. To be free of this world and all the hardships it entails, to be reunited with people who are no longer living on this earth, to spend our days in heaven with God for eternity. Now, throughout history, people have had different opinions about what you need to do to get to heaven. But do we even know who's actually right? How do we know which bridge is the right one to cross? How do we even know if we're on the right bridge at this very moment? Despite all of the unknown and uncertainty, I hold on to the hope that because of Jesus' sacrifice, there's a bridge available for everyone to cross to heaven. God sent his son to earth to walk on the life bridge alongside his other children. God did this fully knowing that his son wouldn't be accepted or he might be hated, and God knew that Jesus would endure suffering. John 3:17 says, God sent his son into the world not to judge the world, but to save the world through him. And none of us are alone on this life bridge. Maybe at some point in the past we thought we were. I know I did. And maybe being alone made it easier to turn around, call it a day, say it's not for me, and just head straight back to the beginning of the bridge. But like I said, things on my bridge are different now. In order to get back to where I started, I'd have to go through this army of people that have entered my life throughout the years and joined my bridge. It would be really hard to get back to the beginning, considering all these people. Now, some physical bridges are historical landmarks, but at some point they will fall, they will fail, they'll fall apart, they'll fade away. But God's bridge with us will last for eternity because of his deep love for us. Romans 8:35-37-39 says, Can anything ever separate us from Christ's love? Does it mean he no longer loves us if we have trouble or calamity, or persecuted, or hungry, or destitute, or in danger, or threatened with life? Oh, that's a lot. No, despite all these things, overwhelming victory is ours through Christ, who loved us. And I'm convinced that nothing can ever separate us from God's love. Neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither our fears for today, nor our worries about tomorrow. Not even the powers of hell can separate us from God's love. No power in the sky, above, or in the earth below. Indeed, nothing in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is revealed in Christ Jesus our Lord. And I find that's such an uplifting promise. Like, God will walk across the bridge with us the whole way. He'll help carry whatever burden we're carrying and rejoice with us when we get to the other side. The next time you have the opportunity to enjoy the beauty and strength of a bridge, just reflect on how sturdy it is and how strong it is to be able to withstand all the weight of people and vehicles that cross over the bridge. But compare these bridges to our Maker. Think of these bridges as a shadow. Imagine all the weight they can carry. But God is our most trustworthy bridge. He helps us improve and rebuild our bridges in our lives. He's more than able to carry and walk with us over the bridge for our lifetime on earth, the bridge between us and God. No matter where we are on whatever bridge we're currently on, we can always count on one person to be there for us. God will always be there no matter how long we take to cross the bridge, and he holds us each step of the way, even when we might not realize it.
Thank you for listening to OAC Vancouver's podcast. Learn more at oacvancouver.ca. If you're in Vancouver, join us for worship Saturdays at 11 a.m. at 5350 Bailey Street. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, review, and subscribe. God bless you and have a wonderful day.